Is that?
I don't know who that was. Yeah, so I had a friend.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very good.
Nice and cool in here this morning. You cold? I mean,
She's serious about her job, that's for sure. So Ed's gonna speak.
A little bit late on our audit committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order by asking Mr. Falconetti to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
as we bow our heads and recognize a moment of silence, let's take this opportunity to think of and remember the first responders, not only in our community but throughout the nation, and with the untimely passing of recently of a Jacksonville sheriff officer as well. Please join me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'd like to remind all the board members that we'll be streaming live video of today's meeting, and please speak into the microphones. First up today is approval of the minutes from the April 30th special board meeting of all the directors and the May 21st board meeting workshop. You should all have received copies of in your board packets. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Chairman.
A second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Any public comments? No public comments. Thank you, Nancy. All right. I would like to take a few moments to recognize the contributions of our former board colleagues, Joe York and Jim Sotrano, who are sitting up front here. They both joined JAXPORT about the same time in 2010 and recently each completed their allotted 8 years of service. Both served as board chairman. Jim held the office twice. And here are just a few of their many accomplishments. Believe it or not, when these gentlemen joined the board, the last segment of the project to deepen the harbor to 40 feet had just been completed. They saw the port celebrate 1 million passengers through the cruise terminal in 2011 and then 2 million passengers in 2016. And most recently made history by helping to approve the first long-term contract with Carnival. Both help us witness and celebrate the arrival of even larger vessels, most recently the 10,000 TEU MOL Bravo, the largest ship to ever call on the Port of Jacksonville. They both participating in getting the ICTF approved and built. Joe and Jim helped okay the investments needed to build our heavy lift berths, as well as the major terminal renovations and new cranes needed to keep our port competitive well into the future. Recently, they approved the expansion of our auto handling capabilities. These investments have already paid off as we are experiencing record-setting volumes and increasing business throughout the port. Joe and Jim helped us usher in the LNG era, approved the strategic plan that has served as our guidepost for several years, selected our strong, bold CEO, Eric, joined us in greeting numerous special visitors, including President Obama in 2013. And perhaps their most lasting legacy is the successful start of the 47-foot deepening project on behalf of our citizens. As we all know, the project is on its way, and we grow ever closer to returning more jobs, dollars, and opportunities to the citizens of Jacksonville. Joe and Jim, we thank you for sharing your wisdom, your friendship, and giving freely of your precious time, guiding this board with strength and humility. And we thank you very much. And for your 8 years of service, we have some lovely parting gifts.
Oh, up here? Okay.
Hey, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, real point of privilege.
Yes.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, wait a minute, Joe.
Joe, real quick, for what it's worth, and not to drag out the meeting and so forth, but I've had the pleasure to serve side by side with y'all for about 7 years, and when I think about the fiduciary responsibility that we're asked to assume in becoming whether it's a gubernatorial or mayoral appointee, and in good faith how we should attempt to professionally interact with staff and other board members and use our skill sets humbly to improve anything we can at JPA. Both of you are just emblematic, I think, of how individuals should approach this opportunity and serve with a servant's heart. And it's just been a real pleasure, and I just thank the world of both of you. And I know without hesitation that JPA is better off because of the leadership that you both have provided. So thank you so much.
We made some good friends up there and certainly out here. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Going to be missed. Going to be missed.
Okay, I'm going to skip through the agenda. Mr. Shelton has to leave, so I want to get to some of the things that we have to vote on. So we'll skip to new business. I'll ask Beth to come up and present BD 2018 Tech 6 Tech 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and good morning again. There are two submissions that I present today. The first is for our operating budget for 2018-19, and subject to your approval, we'll be submitting this budget to the Mayor's Budget Review Committee and the City Councilor's audit. So, Julio, if I could have the, you have the hard copy in front of you, but we have a page up here that's very difficult to read. But I'll summarize. We have operating revenues that are increasing budget year over budget year by 8.73% and budget over actual of what we expect to do, 3.9%. You can see that we have good increases again in our container revenue and reasonable increases in our auto revenue. Our cruise, it continues to be a great provider for us in terms of our net profits, and our other operating revenues, as we discussed in the audit committee, this number is down next year. That's largely the result of our expectation that the fees that we collect for our neighbors who are depositing the dredge material on our spoil sites will decline next year, and we are budgeting that, as a matter of fact, for next year at more historical levels. Operating expenditures, please note the salary number. Our salary line is going up only slightly budget year over budget year, less than 1% at 0.55, and year over year going up 2.17%. Noteworthy, we're allocated or authorized for 155 positions. Only 152 will be filled next year. So that increase is a result of all our positions being, especially at the executive level being full all next year, and also includes a 3% increase, cost of living increase, that will be allocated over the course of the year. We do have increases in benefits. As I mentioned to the Audit Committee, that's largely the result of increase in pension expense. We participate in the FRS system, and our contribution there is going up next year, and also our health insurance costs are going up. The increase in health insurance this year is $252,000 estimated. We have other line items that are reasonably well controlled. We are doing more repair, and Doug Menefee's maintenance group trying to put money. We have been very efficient is not the right word. I would say we've been very careful about any spending for repairs and maintenance, and now we're doing some catch-up work led by Doug and his team, and so we are having some slight increases in both services and also later on in the line item repairs. Security services are up slightly. Most of that work is outsourced, and we have our largest contract, which is right now to USSA, which is under an RFP, and we will be selecting, determining who our new security group will be, if there is a new one, later this year. The big change that you can see in the next to the last item in expenses is berth maintenance dredging. This has been problematic for us over the course of the year. You've heard about it every meeting, and it has to do with the increased dredging we've had to do in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. Typically, we look back 5 years and determine what the average amount of cubic yards of dredging material we have removed. And that normally runs on an historical basis about 150,000 cubic yards. This year, it's over twice that amount, and therefore we are over budget as the year goes on in that amount. Next year, we know it's not going down to historical levels, but it's not going to stay at the level it is now. So we're budgeting just over 220,000 cubic yards. But still, that is dependent on the weather, and we manage that to the best of our ability. Total operating expenditures then will be up, budget over budget 9.94%, but budget over actual, what we expect to do, 3.77%. We'll use our operating income to pay our debt service expenses, and the first line item there, our debt service, will go up next year. That is on the assumption that we will get approval to issue our 2018 bond debt later this summer. We also are paying off debt as we go, but for 2019, we'll be fully advanced on the bond funds, and we will have increased interest expense. The only other thing I would say is the bottom line is we'll produce $8.5 million worth of net revenue. We'll turn that over to Fred Wong and the operations group as they put the money back into infrastructure in the port. In addition, we have outperformed this year revenue over expenses. You'll see just down and to the left of that $8.5 million number, $2.6 million, which is in a cash reserve. We expect to hit that number by the end of the year, but again, that is because we have outperformed our budget this year. Our revenues increasing at a faster pace than expenses. Any questions on that part of the operating statement? Okay. If we can turn to we can go to the fourth page. I'm sorry, Julio, the second page for you. This is our capital expenses estimated for the year. The total amount is, I hope you're looking at hard copies because this is very hard to read up here. The total amount of capital expense next year is expected to be $123 million. That's a big number. There are two components that make up the majority of that. The first is the top line, and that is the rehab of berths 33 and 34. That number is $58.8 million. Of that amount, the state pays 75%, the port pays 25%. You'll hear more about that from James Bennett when he presents a submission. The next large item, making up the $123 million, is right under the Talleyrand total, and that is the deepening Phase 1 of Project B. That number is $46,944,000. That money will come from, one, the state, which will pay about $23 million, and our tenants. We're in negotiation right now with the tenants to pay a total of over $30 million towards the project. They'll do that in 2 years. The first payment will be in 2019. So the other projects are projects either in place right now or will be started next year. And there is a lot of work to do, but it's tight, and it's because of these two big projects we have in front of us. And so as much as Fred and his team would like to spend more money, this is all that we have for them at the present time. So of the $123 million, let's just run our eyes down these numbers. A total of $72 million will come from the state. Just under, the federal government will be just under $1 million. That number may change depending on whether or not the port deepening project is included in the Army Corps of Engineers program of work. We should hear about that any day. The tenant contribution will be just over $23 million. And again, our net operating income of $8.5 million will pay a portion of it. We have a cash reserve of over $3 million, to 2.6 from operations production this year, and then we have two smaller reserves for two particular projects that we have been saving. And then the final amount, the $14,700,000, will come from the issuance of the debt, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So that is the presentation on the budget. I think it's a conservative budget, but it's a good budget, and it's going to take us a lot of work to get there. But with your approval, we will begin the process.
We'll be asking for your approval, but just keep in mind this still has to be reviewed by City Council and the Mayor's office.
That's exactly right. In order to forward it to the Mayor's Budget Review Committee and City Council auditors, we need board approval. But it is proposed until the City Council makes the final approval, which will be sometime in August. Is that right, Tommy? Thank you.
Chairman, excuse me, Chairman, as you know, the Audit Committee unanimously approved this budget this morning, and as such, we offer up to the full board for consideration.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? Say aye.
Thank you very much.
So move. Beth, stay up there.
Good job.
And talk about 2018 6-2.
Yes. So this is an important vote we will ask you for today. This is to allow us to go into the market and issue debt. The port is an infrequent visitor to the bond market, and therefore we have relied and are continuing to rely on help from experts who, this is their trade, this is the work that they do. So one of our experts here today with us is PFM, Public Finance Management. Hope Scarpinato is with us today. And this group took us through the 2012 issue and probably the issues before that, but they're extremely helpful and knowledgeable. We also have our bond counsel, Chauncey Lever, with us today from Foley Lardner, who is of great assistance. In addition, we are relying on investment bankers, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and J.P. Morgan, who are part of this submission asking for your approval. Just a note, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch is the #1 investment banker for port offerings in the United States. So they're being very helpful. And as well, we're relying on experts at the city who are frequent visitors to the bond market, Mike Weinstein, Joey Grivey, and Randall Barnes, who runs the debt business for the city. So we're relying on them as we move forward. In addition, before we get into how we will spend the money, I will share again that we are also working with the rating agencies, and we will do so over the course of this month and early next month, asking them to give us an indicative rating on the amount of debt we intend to offer, because we want to make sure that we hold the good credit rating we have right now. And they will give us feedback on the amount we're asking for, and as well as the terms of condition. We have a lot of expertise. We're not doing this on our own, but so far the project is going very well. So what we are asking today, there's a resolution that our bond council has drawn up which covers many areas around the issuance of the bonds. First of all, it asks for you all to approve us borrowing up to $85 million at an interest rate not to exceed 6%. It authorizes you to approve us signing contracts with our 2 investment bankers, as well as our paying agent and so forth, and many other things that Chauncey can talk to you about. Now, I will tell you, we don't intend to issue $85 million. We intend to issue just over $76 million. We expect, based on what our advisors are telling us, we will not be paying anywhere near 6%. We will be paying more in the area of 4.5%. The resolution also asks you to allow Eric and me and Mike McClung to make a determination as we move closer to the issue date as to whether a bank loan for a portion of the debt would be beneficial to the port. We think it will be. We have an RFP out in the market right now for about $30 million worth of bank debt. If the numbers come in like we think we do, we would be placing about $30 million on bank debt. The rest would go into the bond issue itself. The reason we're not going with all of the money on the cheaper bank debt is that banks will only finance out to 15 years. And we can't stand that kind of repayment, and we don't want a big balloon at the end of 15 years. So we'll fully amortize this debt over 30 years. So how will we use the money? Well, first of all, in the 2 tranches, at the top of the page you can see what we call the public project. So this is money that is going into the public area, the deepening itself. So our share of the harbor deepening project will be about $40 million. We've already paid, of the go-forward contracts is $40 million. For Contract A, we already paid $2.9 million. We are going to pay for Phase 2 of Mile Point Navigation Improvement, and that is the last phase, $1.6 million. We have bought mitigation properties, freshwater and saltwater, for $1,769,000 and $464,000. Those amounts total $46,747,000. Some of this money is outstanding already on our line of credit. We'll talk about that in just a moment. The private project is money that we have spent or will spend on our own lands, upland improvements and so forth. So the first is, we talked about berth 33 and 34. We have to pay a total of $14.1 million. $9.2 million will come from the bonds. The rest will come from our operations. Our auto processing expansion at Dames Point, which is underway, that's $4.2 million. Cruise terminal improvements, which you all have previously authorized, $1.5 million. The Blunt Island paving project, also you all have already approved, $4.2 million. The West Rock property purchase was $1.6 million, and Talleyrand rehab, which we did in order to pull the private terminal operator Crowley-Rand over to our property, $6.4 million, and then the Talleyrand warehouse rebuild, $1.1 million, for a total of $28,424,000. In addition, as a part of the requirement of the bond issue, not the bank, but the bond issue, we'll have to increase our reserves by about $1.3 million. It's not more than that because at the same time we're issuing bonds, we're continuing to make pay down on existing debt. So the net increase in the reserve is $1.3 million. So that total right now is $46,471,908. And on the next page, this is more detail on where the money...
Beth, before you go to that, could you go back to the previous page? The bank debt that you're getting ready to take, and a lot of those projects are already well underway, are they financed currently with line of credit, and so you're hoping to get a better interest rate by going long-term?
Well, some are on the line of credit, and I want to get that line of credit paid down so I have the flexibility to use it as a true swing line for the berth improvements that need to be made on 33 and 34. But in addition, many of these, everything that's going on this debt is very long-term in nature. So it made more sense to match the use of the funds with the length of the debt.
Will we get an interest rate improvement by going long, I would imagine by going long-term versus having it come off our current line of credit?
Actually, we expect to pay about 4.5% on our long-term bank debt. And Mike, can I put you on the spot and ask you to tell me what our rate is on our line of credit?
It's 2.5 to 3%.
So,
Total cost.
So we expect over the next 2 years, as berths 33 and 34 are built out, that we may draw that line of credit up to about $30 million. That would leave us only $20 million of available funds in case of an emergency or some improvement that we needed to do right away for a tenant. So if we chose to leave more of the debt on at the cheaper rate on the line of credit, that would limit my availability for any unexpected need in the future, which is why we've transferred this to longer-term debt.
I see what you're doing. Yeah,
Float from the-
yeah, right. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
On the line of credit, that rate is floating?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Okay, any other questions? All right, so let's take a look at exactly the use of the proceeds. Again, at the top, the total 2018 bond proceeds, $76,471,908 at this moment in time. So first we'll look at the line of credit balance. The line of credit balance right now is $21,570,984. All right, so we're going to draw up another about $2.5 million because we've paid out of cash for some of these projects, and we need to get that on the line of credit in order to pay it off by the bonds. That is on the advice of our bond counsel. So we have the wharf rehab at the Talleyrand, the Dames Point paving. We have less funds expected from St. Johns County. Last month you all approved, at Dave Kaufman's request, the sale of property to St. Johns County, some of the mitigation property. So that'll be a $4.5 million pay down. And the amounts that would remain on the line of credit after these transactions would be just under $2.5 million. So $17,269,000 will go towards paying our outstanding line of credit, revenue note 11. And if you look at the resolution that Chauncey Lever has prepared, you'll see when he describes how the funds will be used, he has these 4 categories that are outlined in the 4 boxes to the side. So the first is repaying outstanding line of credit, as we've detailed right there. Any questions on the line of credit? Then the second part of the bond proceeds will be to pay a part of the cost of the Series 2018 projects, and they are listed here. Our share of the deepening going forward, $40 million. The 33 and 34 berth rehabs, Dames Point processing, expansion of our auto processing facility, cruise terminal improvements, the Mile Point navigation, the warehouse roof replacement, and the Talleyrand wharf rehab project, for a total of $57,902,466. In addition to that, we'll need to fund the $1.3 million incremental increase in the reserve account, and then finally we'll pay closing costs for the issuance of the bonds. The closing costs right now are estimated to be just under about $500,000. So in the whole scheme of things, this is not a giant transaction for these markets, but it's a big transaction for us. Again, we don't go to the market that often. We don't borrow a huge amount of money very frequently. The last time we did was 2012. When we meet with the rating agencies, we will ask them not only to give us a rating on this level of debt, which will be about $76 million, we're also going to ask them to give a rating, what about if we wanted to borrow $110 million? They will tell us what they think that would do in their minds as far as the rating goes for us. We have no intention right now of borrowing that amount of money. But what we do know as we look out into 21, 22, 23, and 24, we may have needs. And by asking them to give us a rating to see how close we would get to breaking the ratios that would cause them to downgrade us, that will give us an idea of how long it will take before we can get back to the market to do improvements that we know are in front of us. Now, if this is approved today, then the final one of the final things that you are doing in the authorization is you are delegating authority to your CEO, to your interim CFO, and to your Director of Finance to sign all the necessary documents in order to execute this offering. And we will execute the offering in late July. That's our target. And then in August and September, when everything is sold, we will come back to you and report the results of the offering.
Mr. Chairman, one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
Beth, in looking at this one, on the JAXPORT share of the harbor deepening, the $40 million in 2018, and that's part of the question I'm trying to get my hands around. I know how much the total harbor deepening project is for A, B, and C, not counting D. And this $40 million we're estimating to help us fund this for a period of time. Is that based on, what we think we're going to generate operating cash flow that's going to help our share? How'd you kind of walk me through just real quickly how you came up with $40 million for our harbor deepening?
We have a funding model that shows how the total $484 million, which is the estimated cost of the projects A, B, and C, would be funded. So it's our share, it's the state share, it's the city share, and it's the tenant share. It's also the federal government share. The federal government paid $21.5 for Project A, but the model is built as if they would pay us nothing for the rest.
Right.
Okay, so what we have said is, all right, of the total amount that we would be expected to pay, the $2.9 million last year, the money we'll pay this year, and then a final payment in 2022, I think it is. That is the rounded up the $40 million. We have a little bit excess in there because we don't know for sure what amount the projects will come in for.
Right.
Project B. So we left ourselves a little bit of room there.
So that model's built as if the federal government really pays nothing except what they've already put in already, which was last year's 21.5.
That's right.
So, okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, we are very hopeful that this year and in future years, the federal government will put money in. And remember, everything the federal government puts in reduces by half what the state puts in and what the city puts in. It
And what we have
reduces whatever share they put in, right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Then we'll call.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to make sure that the board understood we would not go out for any offering, even though you're giving myself and Beth the ability to sign documents without notifying the board firsthand on exactly what we're going out for, okay? So there will be a notification in doing that prior to.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I approve the debt issuance.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very
Motion
much. We'll
passes.
do our
Thank you, Beth.
best.
Okay, Mr. Bennett, talk to us about 18-6-3.
Good morning. As Beth has pointed out several times, we have a berth that we need to reconstruct, berth 33 and 34 at Blunt Island Marine Terminal. This is a center portion of the overall terminal berth. It is a critical part of our infrastructure to prepare us for the long-term development of Blunt Island. And we have a project, while we call it reconstruction, it's really brand new. We remove what's there and completely reconstruct both 33 and 34. This matches up with what was built for 35 and half of 34 previously. It handles the 100-gauge cranes, and it continues that same process down. So we'll have berths 33, 34, and 35 fully ready for post-Panamax with the full cranes and so forth. The overall project is a $58.8 million project, and we're thankful that the Florida Department of Transportation wants to give us $44.1 million to help go towards that construction project. We are aggressively working on having the plans completed. We received the final plans in this past week, so we are preparing to be ready to go come back to the board with a set of bid documents so that we can actually go to construction in October. However, in getting prepared for that, getting our funding in place today, we have an agreement before you today to authorize the CEO to move forward executing a funding agreement, or if you pass the resolution, authorizing to execute a funding agreement for us to be able to receive a total of $44.1 million from the Florida Department of Transportation. That is made up where we have some money in next year from the department, and then some funding as deferred reimbursement out over years 21, 22, and 23. That's when they will start paying us back for some of those funds. It requires the JAXPORT to put in 25%, which our share of the overall project is $14.7 million. So we have a resolution before you to authorize the CEO not only to execute the original agreement, but any subsequent modifications and changes that may be necessary in order to receive the funding for the Department of Transportation. And I'm glad to answer any questions with that if you have any.
James, briefly take us through how are we going to work without customers being affected by this?
One of the things that we have to be very particular with is how the phasing of the berth reconstruction is taking place. These berths already have some limitations now to their use, and so it's not a significant impact. But we will look and see which way we need to shift the operations in ensuring that we continue to are able to berth ships immediately adjacent to it. This is looking at how we phase the overall construction.
Have we discussed this with the tenants?
We have, and we'll continue to do so. This berth is right now significantly limited with what we use there today. One of our key factors is where will the cranes be placed, because once we remove this, you obviously will not slide cranes past it. Okay, so we will look ahead of time. The 100 gauge cranes are located further to the, what I will call the east. That's your large crane, 100 gauge cranes. They can't go any further than they currently do today anyway, because there's no crane rails for the 100 gauge cranes. So this is not affecting the 100 gauge cranes. It's only affecting the 50 gauge cranes, and this section is not fully utilized today because of its condition.
So we don't anticipate any loss of any revenue?
No, sir, we do not. We'll work around that. We'll work with the ship schedules to do that. So we do not anticipate any downside for our tenants at all. This has been we've been very cautious, because also immediately to the south of this is berth 32. That's where we have the high fructose corn syrup lines and things that are critical, and making sure that those ships are able to stay and continue to use the systems that are in place there. So that remains a continued focus to ensure that we don't have any downtime for our tenants.
Great. Any other questions? Anybody have any questions? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Move to approve as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved, thank you. We'll have one little quick one here from Fred, and then we'll go back to the other presentations. So you can just stay up there, Fred. This is 2018 6-4.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board.
Morning.
Just to give you a little background, JAX LNG is the owner and developer of LNG liquefaction plant on Dames Point, adjacent to lands owned by JAXPORT. The liquefaction plant produces and supplies LNG to Tote Marine, and as you all know, they are one of our major tenants at Blunt Island. Once fully operational, the LNG will be transferred to a bunker barge and will supply LNG directly waterside to these tote vessels. Due to certain regulations and requirements, JAX LNG must have the ability to contain any discharge over land controlled by JAX LNG. A dispersion analysis was conducted by JAX LNG, which indicates that under certain circumstances, any airborne plumes could potentially migrate over the adjacent JAXPORT property. With this limited land use agreement before you, it will give JAX LNG sufficient land rights under their control to comply with the regulatory obligations without having to build any additional containment structures. The limited land use agreement is for approximately 4 acres with an initial contract term of 10 years with 2 5-year options to renew. The initial lease rate is for $11,300 per acre with annual CPI adjustments. The property will continue to function as a stormwater retention facility for JAXPORT as well. Staff respectfully recommends the Board of Directors to approve the limited land use agreement before you and authorize our CEO to execute without any additional board action.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Fred? Okay, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the lease. Make a motion, Wendy.
I approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Fred. You can stay up there, and we'll go back to, since we skipped around a little bit, to the milestones.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So this is a happy part of what we do here at JAXPORT. And as you all know, to any successful deep water port, you have, of course, your deep water, you have your ship-to-shore gantry cranes, and you have efficient operations. Today, we're honoring 3 employees who have served JAXPORT and our community with a combined years of 75 years total. One of them, they're not here to accept their certificate. However, she worked last night, so she needs some rest right now to put it to bed. So first, I would like to bring up Ed Simmons. Please, come on up. So while he's coming up, Ed Simmons, he is our assistant asset manager here at Blount Island. Sir, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Let me just first and foremost say that we thank you for your 20 years of service. 20 years is a long time. Ed has completed positions as a crane technician, a foreman, and right now as an assistant asset manager. He's a master at scheduling personnels and cranes to keep our operations efficient. His supervisors praise his ability to promote teamwork, prevent mistakes, and keep Blount Island running efficiently. He is also a veteran of the United States Navy. And to that, I must say thank you for your service to this country, our community, and JAXPORT for 20 years, sir. Thank you.
Gotta hold it up there. Yeah, good. Congratulations.
Congratulations. All right. So lastly, and let me tell you, spending your whole career here at one particular organization, let me tell you, it's tough. It's not easy to give your heart and soul to one organization, and that dedication is let me tell you, most definitely appreciated. I want to bring up Ozzie Brown. Ozzie. So while Ozzie's coming up, let me just tell you a little bit that Ozzie has 30 years, one of our longest tenures here at JAXPORT.
All right, Ozzie.
So everyone who works with Ozzie, they know that he's a positive force and a great role model. 30 years ago, if you guys can maybe just imagine, 30 years ago, Ozzie answered a newspaper ad to come do some work on cranes on Talleyrand in 1988. And as you know, he got the job, he got the position, and that's history right there. But according to his supervisor, he always works the end game in mind. He keeps the cranes running smoothly, efficiently, and as far as Ozzie, his expertise is not only in his own work, but the new generations coming on, he teaches them, he trains them, he makes sure that the baton is passed properly. Ozzie's motto is teamwork, hard work, and getting the job done right. So Ozzie, for that, I thank you for your service, 30 years, sir.
Thank you, Ozzie.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, I'll turn it over to Eric, and we're going to talk about Roy. In fact, when Fred was talking about 75 years of service, I, for some reason, thought of Roy.
That was pretty smooth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Eric.
This is a little bittersweet for me to say a few words about Roy. For those of us that know Roy, we all know that he's presented, consistent passion for the Port of Jacksonville. Roy has led our international marketing team for nearly 2 decades. He helped to realize the vision, of Jacksonville Asian Connection. In 2008, we were not in the international market, and because of Roy, we are today, and we're doing quite well. Roy is a tireless advocate. He's brought a sense of new business here. for the port as well as jobs to this community. And Roy, I want to say, you know, over the 13 years that I've shared with you, being here at the port, I just truly want to thank you for your dedication, your friendship, and the impact that you've had here at JAXPORT. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. All right, so James, you're back up. Give us an engineering and construction update.
Good morning once again. I've got just a couple of projects to present to you to give you a status on where they're at, and as far as the construction progress. The first one is our terminal here, Talleyrand Marine Terminal, berths 7 and 8. This is the sheet pile reconstruction. We have gradually been replacing berths and upgrading berths along the way. These sheet piles are one step. We also have, in conjunction with it, a separate contract that is doing underdeck work. And we're getting ready to start fairly soon the design and following with construction for the actual sheet piles. But this is still the sheet pile walls, berths 7 and 8. We are continuing to make good progress on it as we move forward. We really have it broken down into 3 phases. The first phase was actually the section in the center, which was getting prepared for Crowley's ship to come in, for their LNG ship. That section has been completed for some time now, and we've continued to move to the south in order to tie in down to berth 6. And we're very close to getting there. We've got one last section at the very southern end that we're continuing to work on. They've got a little bit more of the deck that they're going to be pouring this week, some final crane rail beams, and then finally we'll do an asphalt. So we anticipate over the next month have all of that work for that section finished over the next 3 to 4 weeks. We've already started mobilization to the north end, so that is about half the equipment's mobilized to the north end to start the third phase, phase 3, which will take us all the way to the far north end. So again, we continue to make good progress on it. We had a few setbacks earlier on where we was tying in between phase 1 and 2, but that has been addressed, and again, making good progress for that, and already starting the paving process on portions of phase 2. Some of these pictures look so much alike each month because it's a lot of the same type of work. But believe it or not, these are new photos. They just look very similar. I mean, when you're doing the same work, it's just a little different angle. So, but they are different, I'll assure you. But you can see this is some of the work that where we're getting ready to place the deck. We've got some again the sheet pile wall placement that was going on. But again, a lot of progress on that. The next project is the RoRo, the roll-on roll-off parking improvement over at the cruise terminal. Again, we're making a lot of progress on that as well. We are continuing right now to put in the pipes. Most of the stormwater system has been installed. We have paving. Brought in all the lime rock for the base water side, so we didn't have all the trucks coming in. So that has been in. It's being put in place today. And we're starting to see light poles foundations grow up out of the lime rock. Those are the high mass foundations getting ready for the lights. What's amazing is a lot of folks don't realize how much work is to go in before you ever see that final surface. Everything from your electrical conduits, your data and communications, your foundations, stormwater pipes, and a lot of those items have been in place, and we continue to make good progress there. One of the things that we're really focused on now is we later had added on the slope protection for Winds Creek because of the erosion. We continue to focus on that. We are having some challenges with that because of additional erosion, but we're making a lot of progress on that. We have received the permits from the Army Corps of Engineers as well as the Department of Environmental Protection, and we're looking at now continue to, and we've issued the notice to proceed to the contractor, and we're working through some permitting issues and erosion protection in the creek itself as we make progress on that. So that's the big challenges with that one, is the slope protection at the moment. We have the security and the payment booths are on order to come in for the new security booths and payments, as well as getting ready to order the canopies for where the shuttles drop off, for the provision for the passengers to be able to get under a canopy and walk all the way into the cruise terminal without getting wet in inclement weather. So again, a lot of progress. Most of it has been underground that you don't really notice now when it's all said and done, but again, a good bit of progress on that. So that's my 2 major projects that's going on. What I'll add to next month is on the Talleyrand Marine Terminal sheet pile wall, I'll add some additional information on the underdeck work that we're doing as well to give you some updates on that.
I'll get some new pictures, too.
Yes, sir, I'll make sure you have new pictures next week, next time as well. They'll be very similar, though.
We'll take your word for it. Okay, thanks. Any questions for James? Okay, thank you. Mike, you come up and give us a update on monthly financials.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm going to take the mic here so I can walk through this pretty quickly. Some of this we've talked about with the budget presentation, but revenues, snapshot of revenues 7 months year to date. You can see revenues are very strong. We're exceeding our budget targets by 11%, and prior year by 18%. Let's move to the next slide. We'll break it down by containers and autos, which we typically do, which is about 75% of our business. TEUs up 6%, strong 23% volumes year over year, so some strong numbers on both fronts, both revenues and TEUs. As we noted last month, the dollars are exceeding our TEU volumes largely because of the Crowley delays with their with some of their cargo, but we continue to accrue to their minimum annual guarantee of 1 million tons. So we've put them on notice about that, so they know that that MAG invoice may be awaiting them, but we're hoping more so that volumes will actually pick up over the back half of the year. Next schedule, automobiles, another good year, 2% growth in revenue, or I should say exceeding budget by 2%, as well as units. A little bit down from last year, as last year was a record volumes of in auto units, and we've also we had some temporary business with the Hyundai Kias at Dames Point, about 18,000 units that with some Brunswick overflow, somewhat of a one-time revenue item, but again, strong numbers in the auto line item as well. Next slide, please. Expenses. Again, dredging is hitting us hard this year. We see dredging over budget $2 million. That's going to be more like 2.5 by the end of the year as we continue to dredge. We did not anticipate the Irma event, and that's hit us pretty hard. But again, we ratcheted up the 2019 budget to anticipate some of that additional dredging. But that, by and large, is the explanation for the increase in operating expenses to budget. And we also see some repairs and maintenance over budget. Again, as Beth mentioned earlier, already being proactive in some of the in-house projects we're doing at Blunt Island, lighting, paving, striping, as well as Dame Point, just some overall upgrades of our facilities. Next slide, please. And this is the overview, the big picture financial statements. One thing that I'd like to mention is the other operating revenue is in fact $2 million over budget. That's certainly helping our revenue picture. That's something we don't budget aggressively. That's the tipping fees and the TWIC escort fees, which is the new product or new revenue item for us in that, also is something we do not budget aggressively. That $2 million is going to, although it's a one-off type revenue item, is going to help our cash flows towards the end of the year. We've talked about expenses, debt service. We have some savings in debt service as well. Bottom line, we're seeing about $2.9 million of earnings above and beyond our budget expectation. That will help us out with our cash modeling, and it's going to help us with our 2019 budget cash reserve. We've talked about that previously as well. Next slide, please. The balance sheet, I'm going to get a little bit granular here. Hope you'll bear with me on this, but $14 million of cash at the end of April. Our targets are more like where we were at the end of last year, which is right at $16 million, which is 1/2 or 6 months of our operating expenses. That's what the rating agencies like to see. We're going to, with the execution of the bonds and the reimbursement of the LOC is actually going to bring down about $2.5 million off the line of credit, which is going to restore those cash levels to where they historically should be. And that was by design. Those projects that were intended for the line of credit, we've just been taking those funds out of the cash reserves because they're still at levels that we can tolerate at $14 million. So that's going to be around $16 million, and we think we'll land there by the end of the year. Just real quick, these balances here are for our debt reserves. Excuse me, actually, that's really our escrows to pay off our debt. These balances here are our debt reserves that Beth talked about relative to our bond funds. We set those aside to make the final principal payments for our debt to keep the rating agencies and our bond covenants in compliance. So that's going to go up about $1.3 million with the proposed bond issue. Next page, please. Yes, ma'am. Hold it. Okay. Okay. Thank you. The line of credit, again, $21.5 million. It's been there since the beginning of the year. We're going to see that bump up to around $24 million, and then concurrently drop to about $2.5 with the bond issue. So that's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit with the balance sheet, but I kind of want to walk through the activity relative to the line of credit and some of the movement of the cash. Mr. Chairman, that's the balance of my report. Any questions? I moved pretty quickly there.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, now Roy, the last time.
Last one, yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to all the great news as usual.
Well, good morning through the chair, vice chair, and the remaining board members. It is unique. It's I can remember standing here the first time years ago, and I had a crimson and gold tie on, in like Florida State colors. I didn't go to Florida State, but it just happens that was a tie. Garnet gold, sorry. That's the marketing staff. They're there all the time for you. But anyway, I can remember I had it on, and I think it was Jerry or one of the board members said, you know, what kind of tie you got on there? And I said, well, it's just gold. And he says, that's a Florida State tie. He says, I went to Florida. So the next time I went out, the next meeting, I went out and bought a Florida tie. That you press the button, it played the flight song. So I learned at a young age when I was first here that you want to take care of the board members, and when they say something, pay attention to it.
Well, that's why you're still here. You're a quick learner. You're
a
quick learner.
We thank you for that. Eric, I want to thank you very much for those kind words. It means a lot. Worked here, great team. Not a lot to say today in the meeting. It's a smaller business plan, our business report. Just want to mention on the container growth, you're going to see continued, not only when we get to 47 foot, but even prior to that, because with the one as part of the MOL, NYK, and K-Line, people like K-Line who didn't support us heavily in containers will start doing that now. So those numbers will continue to rise. I did want to mention that on the autos, we are working on 3 contracts, either we're halfway through them or we're just starting. But the new auto terminal, we're going to finalize that contract soon. The Southeast Toyota contract, we're going to work on that and finish that up pretty soon. And of course, WW Logistics, or WW Solutions now, is going after their new contract. Everything's in good hands. Beth and Linda and everybody will do a great job. The marketing staff, you know, I know I'll forget some of them, but you can rest assured that when I leave, that the marketing staff it's a good group of people. This entire organization is a good group of people, but I can tell you that it's leaving them in good hands. I mean, with Robert Peak really kind of riding the saddle there for everybody, with Aisha and Lisa and Frank and Dave and all the support groups, Jeff and Carolyn and everybody, and Mackenzie. It's a really good group of people. So they know the customers all know them. We've got a great reputation in this industry around the world. As Eric said before, we're no longer a regional port. We are the real #1 true international port for Florida, and we're a major player in this trade. And we'd like to thank everybody for that. And the only thing I ask for is make sure that when the 47-foot channel is done, I get an invite to come back for that. I'm going to be there for the opening. It means a lot. But if you have any questions about the report, please let me know. If not, I want to thank all my group. I want to thank everybody at JAXPORT. It's been a good run.
We want to thank you, Roy. This port is much better off because you were here.
Thanks, sir.
So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fine.
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to go. Hey, I skipped the most important report, and that's Eric, so let's go back to Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have a couple of things to add. Over the last couple of months, we've been working in a partnership with the city of Jacksonville on an infra grant. And infra, the acronym stands for Infrastructure for Building America, and the grant was specifically, or is specifically, for the demolition and the rerouting of the Hart Bridge Expressway. One might ask, well, why the port was involved. It became very apparent that the port would be heavily impacted in the demolition of the expressway, so much so that there was a flyover instituted as part of the design, the new design, once the ramp is taken down to at grade for the port and the increased volumes that we see and will be receiving in the near future. So I wanted to thank the team for their diligence and their continued work and partnership with the city on that grant, and hopefully we'll hear something in the way of that in the coming weeks. Last month I traveled to D.C. I met with, along with Justin Damiano. We met with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as OMB staff members and several congressional members, and it was just for a single purpose, and that purpose simply was to continue our efforts of being persistent as it pertains to our harbor, our funding in the work plan and the Army Corps work plan. We are hoping that we hear something in the near future. We think that it may be this week. And from my understanding, it was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but I think there's a lot of horse trading that's going on right now. But as soon as I get the word, I'll make sure that the board members are informed of either our success or lack thereof, but we keep our fingers crossed as we move forward.
Is there money appropriated for that, Eric? Or is that
for the work plan?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It is.
Is money appropriated?
Yes, sir. It is. What happens is the appropriators appropriate those dollars every year, and really the Corps, they have their level of recommendations by districts for how those funds are spent. But the Office of Management and Budget actually has the final say. So there's a lot between the two agencies that go into what projects get in and what projects don't. As you well know, and I think we've talked about over the years, the Army Corps of Engineers, they recommend a certain benefit to cost ratio, and OMB, for lack of a better word, they come back and they sort of do the rack and stacking. The Corps don't do the rack and stacking, they just recommend the projects. But as any agency, you only have so much cash to spend or to share as it pertains to your project, so they have to go through a process in doing so. And I think that's what they're finalizing as we speak. TPC is really big for this region. It brings a lot of people here. There's a lot of spending, heads and beds, and so on and so forth. But JAXPORT see TPC as a different opportunity for us, and that is one where it gives us a chance to really spend some time with our customers. And that's what we did the week of the TPC. A lot of the presidents and vice presidents of the companies that are here and housed at the port literally come in town, not only for the tournament, but Roy and his team has done a great job with putting together different events where we can actually spend time and talk about their business and the opportunities there going forward. So, Roy, thank you for your team and putting together Customer Appreciation Week. Well done and well attended. I had the honor of sitting down and meeting with the new CEO of CSX, Mr. Foote. We had a very, very good meeting. As you all well know, CSX are the two lines out at Dames Point and Blunt Island. We talked actually about how to improve and increase the turn time as it pertains to the unit trains that are being built at both of our facilities. He seemed to be very bullish about the opportunity in the future, and we have agreed to meet on a regular basis. So that meeting was timely. Justin, Fred, and myself attended the Florida Ports Council meeting. The Florida Ports Council meet on a quarterly basis, annually. There are a lot of different things that are discussed at those meetings, but the one takeaway at this particular meeting was all of the ports coming together and talking about how do we lobby in D.C. for increased Custom and Border Patrol officers. Unlike the other ports, ours is a little different, and I actually feel a little better about it. The other three ports, which I would say Everglades, Miami, and Canaveral, their issues with custom officers or lack thereof is more geared around their cruise, the influx of cruise passengers there. Ours is container volume. And of course, as we know, containers pay a whole lot more. And it gave us an opportunity to really discuss how the volumes here at Jacksonville is growing. We all agreed to put together a lobbying effort in D.C. to go about trying to execute how we ask for an increase in those officers. The effort will be led by Congressman Rutherford. Obviously, he's on Homeland Security, and we've been in conversation with his office, led by the team, and he's very, very amenable to helping us in that area. Last week, formerly WWL, now it's WWS, which is one of our auto processors here. They have about 70 acres. Our executive team met with their executive team from New York. Surprisingly enough, they came and they put on the table sort of an overture of an acre amount that they would like to see in the near future. Obviously, we don't have that acre amount, but as we continue to look forward to the future, we're looking at some things and ways that we can accommodate them. It is a large footprint that they would like here in Jacksonville, which means that, you know, we'll get increased volumes. But as this port grow, one thing you can rest assured, land is at a premium and it's at its best and highest use now. And I continue to challenge the team every day to make sure that we are looking at what that best and highest use may be before we sign on the dotted line with any tenant going forward. But they have been a tenant here for a number of years. They are one of our top 10 customers, and we will definitely try and do our best to accommodate them in the future. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Anybody have any questions for Eric? Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Roy. Yeah.
As I mentioned, I would probably forget somebody, and I did. And this is one of the most important people in my life here in this organization, because you have two wives. You have your work wife and you have your home wife. And I see Jill Mashburn. Where are you, Jill? Stand up. Stand up. I see her more than I see my wife. So I couldn't do what I did without her and without the group. Like I said, great group, but she really made things work for me. So I really appreciate everything you do for me.
Jill, you did a good job with him.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point in other business, I'll ask for a motion to approve travel for any members of the board called to do business and attend meetings on behalf of the port during the month of July.
So moved.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry? Oh. Okay, we have one housekeeping item that needs to be addressed, and I would like to ask our new board member, Wendy Hamilton, to formally take on the role of being the board's TPO representative. And Becky can get you all the information on this, and I'd like to, although he's already gone, I'd like to thank Jamie Shelton for serving in this role since October of 2016. I didn't know when I first did it, I didn't know TPO existed, but I found it very interesting to participate in, so I hope you'll enjoy it as well, and thank you for doing it. So, any other questions or comments? Oh, yes. Yeah, where did I miss her at? Carla. Good morning. Good morning.
I know you saved the best for last.
Yeah, we always
the
like
most
to.
exciting part. And this is the ethics update. And when I was preparing, I thought, when's the last time I've been out here? And it was 2 years. And I thought, 2 years? And it's because it's been very quiet over here, which is good. You want it to be quiet from the ethics standpoint. It is not quiet in some parts of the city right now. Quiet is good. So what I have is speed ethics. Now, when I say speed ethics, it doesn't mean that I want to diminish any of these points, because all of the plans that you were talking about today, very sophisticated plans, if you want to throw a wrench in the middle of all of that, you have one ethics problem of one person, and it stops everything dead in its tracks. So just because I've summarized this and I've put it together in a very quick format does not mean that each of these points aren't really important. So what we decided to do 20 years ago when I started doing this for the city, we actually would have elected officials for 2 days trying to teach them the law. They didn't like that very much. And so we've now abbreviated it into issue spotting. So you need to be able to spot these issues. So let's take a look at it. First of all, I want to talk about your purpose for learning about government ethics. Is it to check a box? Is it, because it's mandatory? For me, I do this when I could be retired because of the real purpose of government ethics, which I wanted to share with you. And that comes from Dennis Thompson at Harvard, and he says the purpose of government ethics is to educate public employees and officials about their important role in American democracy. That if you personally benefit from holding a public position, it leads to unfairness and a breakdown of our democracy. All of our ethics rules hinge on this. Is there going to be a breakdown in democracy? Are people going to take a look and say, gosh, that person was in that position because they wanted to get something for themselves. They maneuvered it, and now they're better off than I am. In fact, I think the public almost wants people to get into an elected office or a board position and be worse off, like be poorer, and certainly they don't like the image of flying on private jets and vacations and conferences in Las Vegas. That makes them trust the process, distrust the process. Now, a colleague of mine at Harvard said that in a 60-page paper, which is brilliant. If you had the time to read it, I'll send it to you. But he said we're in a crisis. Institutions are increasingly corrupted. Our form of government is fragile, and there's a threat of demise. And you don't think of that. You don't think of like when we have headlines on trust going down like it does. And yesterday's Times Union, shaken trust, and that, of course, one of the people in the pictures there was from the Port Authority, and so not only does it throw a wrench in the works at the time, you get stuck with it for like decades afterwards, that someone decreased the public trust. So if you took a look at this article and read it, I was quoted and I said something that I really believe, which is of the hundreds and hundreds of conversations I've had with our elected officials, all of them are trying really hard to comply with Florida laws, and Florida laws are very complex. We're not perfect. Every once in a while something happens, but the incredible support for the ethics laws has been really heartening to me, and that's why I do what I do. So how to stay out of trouble. Now, these are the areas, this is for issue spotting. I am not going to go over the 50 pages of Florida laws on this. These are the issues. You've got your cheat sheet here. It's one piece of paper with 10 things on it. These are the 10 trouble areas that have come up over and over again in our city's history. So let's take a look at them. Here's the 10. Number 1, you might be in trouble if you take anything over $100 from someone, and it's for you or your family member. If someone's being nice to you and they're giving you something, be suspicious. Your next door neighbor brings something over, suspicious. You know, if anyone's doing any business with the port, freeze, don't take anything. You know, and if your next door neighbor gives you something, thank you very much, nice Christmas present, they better not be doing any business with the port, you know, or be thinking about it. You know, so it's best, like I remember when John Payton got elected mayor and he was getting married at the same time. And so really it would have been better to get married before, because if you get married when you are an elected official, you have to declare every one of your wedding gifts. You know, so it's pages and pages. So taking anything is a danger thing. So everything, even if it's good for the port to do something like, oh, you know, it's good for me to go to New York to this conference, it's good for the port. Yeah, it's a gift to you. It's a gift. Someone gives you a book on good things to do with port authorities. If that book is worth more than $100 and it came from a vendor, it's a gift, even if it's good for the port. So anytime someone gives you something nice, don't say thank you, be suspicious. Okay, so anything over $100 or $250 per year from a lobbyist, any employer of a lobbyist, anyone wanting to do business with the city, take nothing, take nothing. Exception, a gift does not include for you on this board anything that comes to you as a result of your employment or your service as an officer or director of a corporation. You know, so if your business usually gives gifts at Christmas time, you know, and you're doing things that are connected to your business outside of the Port Authority, that is exempt from being a gift. You can't even take a cup of coffee with the understanding that you'll vote a certain way. Obviously, it's called a bribe, but you all know that. And in fact, I got some questions over the last couple of days of, do you train people on 1040 forms? Yeah, I don't train people to file your taxes. You know, file your taxes and don't lie on them. You know, so there's a lot of things that we don't cover in ethics training, and it's in the realm of criminal law. You know, there are lots of crimes like bribes, failing to file tax returns, falsifying records, that type of thing. Obviously, you don't do those things, but I'm not covering them in my top 10. If you make a mistake and you find out someone gave you a gift and it's over $100, you have 90 days to pay it down. And a lot of times council people will find something like that out and they'll pay for the gift, and then it's not a gift anymore. You might be in trouble if you ask for anything of value. Don't ask for any favors. For you, your family, oh, you know, I just, you know, my nephew got arrested for DUI. He's a really good, you know, do you have any legal advice for me, to a lawyer who comes in front of you? No, you don't ask for anything from anybody. Don't use official letterhead. Don't ask a vendor or a lobbyist even for a donation for $5 for a cake. For your charity, hey, we're having a big fundraiser, you know, for my charity. Can you give some money for it? You're not asking for yourself. The law considers that you are. So don't ask people for anything. That puts people in a tough position, you know, because you look out and you say, oh, these people all need something from me. Some people went to prison down in South Florida for that, because a woman who was a county commissioner needed money for her turtle foundation because she cared about sea turtles. It's nice, I care about sea turtles, but she was asking people that were doing business with the county commission. She's in prison, you know, so enough said. So you might be in trouble if you go places out of town. Now, I see that you just approved travel. So whenever you go, even on port business, who's paying for it? It better be the port. If it's anyone else, it could run afoul of ethics violations. If 2 or more of you go on a trip to a conference and the Port Authority pays for it, great. Shouldn't be a vendor, shouldn't be anyone that wants business from us paying for it. But if anyone, like if 2 of you go, there are potential sunshine violations. You'd think that you could sit down with people and chat over a nice dinner, you know, about the Port Authority. No, you can't, because there's 2 of you board members there and it violates the sunshine law. So it's best if one of you goes with maybe 1 staff member. Going with 2 people, you're going to get criticized for a potential violation of the sunshine law. If the board sends you and you fill out official forms with your board, then that's okay. If anyone else sends you or you fly on anyone's private jet, danger, danger, front page headlines. You might be in trouble if you fail to file your financial or gift disclosure forms when you come on the board. You've probably filed yours, Wendy, already? No. Okay, well, all right, we'll do that today. When you come on the board, you have a couple months to file it, and when you leave, you have to file, and every July. You obviously don't want to falsify the forms and not put companies on that you're listed as a corporate officer of. You know, you need to list everything on those forms. Gift return forms are if anybody gives you a gift, but you can't take any gifts from anybody that's doing business with the Port Authority, so what do you declare? Your next door neighbor gives you a $150 Christmas gift. That's a Form 9. It's not connected to your business, which is exempt. So suffice to say, don't take gifts when you're on the board because you do have a filing responsibility. Yeah, we talked about that. So you might be in trouble if there's a conflict between your board duties and your personal life. So just imagine that this is the Port Authority, but you've got your personal life with your family and your friends. You've got also your businesses, but none of them can have little lines into the Port Authority at all. If anyone mentions the word port, when you're at home or if you're with your business partners, hey, I have a matter that's coming in front of the board, you know, that's like danger. Mentioning Port Authority outside in your other circles means someone's trying to get to you, to influence you. You've got to be like sharp and aware when that happens. So those are the circles of your government office, which is the Port Authority, your family and friends, and your business associates. They tend to kind of coalesce, but you have to be very careful when they do. You have to be alert, and you have to talk to Eric, you have to talk to Linda, your ethics representative, or myself, because you do not want to be on the front page of the paper. You will have conflicts because everybody in Jacksonville knows everybody else. So people are going to come up to you, and they're going to say, oh, I hear you're on the board, and you know, my cousin over here has a matter. I mean, it just is going to naturally happen. So you have to be alert when that happens, and just kind of step back a little bit and not be polite and friendly like we're all trained to be, but be tight. Be tight on these areas because they lead to the FBI coming in and getting records. Selling to the Port Authority, being a consultant for the Port Authority, working for a company, any company that you interact with that does business with the Port Authority, problem. Could be okay, but we have to check it out, and you should get in writing that it's okay. Your family does any kind of business with the Port Authority. Your business partner, someone that you have some tenuous, loose link business-wise to, and they're coming to the Port Authority. Those are all danger areas for you. Now, there's a handout for you. I could speak for an hour on this. Read it. If it seems to jump out at you, call me later and we can go over it. It's Jacksonville Ethics Code Section 50. It applies to you. It's fairly, I should say, obtuse the way it's written. It was written 40 years ago. I'd like it to be in plain English, so good luck in reading it. But basically, what it means is you can't sue the city. You can't be in any adverse position to the city, not just the Port Authority. But like if you have a partner who is going in front of the city for something, and they're in somewhat of an adverse position, that's a violation for you. So read over the one-page handout you've got on Chapter 50. If you've got questions or it rings a bell of what you might be involved in, then give me a call. Your business partners cannot be involved in certain matters. You know, so this is in the process of being rewritten, but until it is, you do not want to be caught on a Chapter 50 violation. Okay, now you might be in trouble if you misuse your position, throw your weight around in any way. I remember the Port Authority. You know, you don't want to be saying that anywhere, especially if you get stopped by the police for anything. You don't want to be flipping out, you know, any kind of identification and talking about your position. Now, going to court with someone, calling a judge, trying to get any favors, getting a table, parking place, upgrade on a flight, anything using your position. But the tricky one is interfering with JPA personnel. Any kind of contacts with personnel, you should be going through Eric and the staff for that. You should not be directly impinging upon any staff members of JPA. Now, here's a person, a current case, Miss Oakley, who's a county commissioner, and she now, there's probable cause that she violated state ethics commission rules because she's accused of licking a manager on his throat and up his face. So she was at a party.
No
Yeah, go.
Don't do any more licking.
Good, I'll never do it again.
All right.
No licking. She had some drinks, and she was at this party, and she goes up to the city and just starts licking him on the neck, and he didn't say anything because, you know, she had control over his job, but then she fired him later, you know, along with some other county committee. Bad idea, you know, so then the licking complaint comes up, and there were lots of witnesses to the licking. See, I mention this because the Me Too movement is a very big movement now, nationwide, and if there is any kind of flirtation, anything like that, it could actually be called a misuse of your position as a board member and violate state ethics laws. So it's really, just no licking, but no interaction that's not like 100% professional with all staff, and all city staff too. I mean, and that goes without saying. You might be in trouble if you vote on an issue in which you have a conflict. If you know any of the people involved or you have any kind of tie into it, you have got to check with legal ahead of time. If you don't vote on things where you have a conflict. When it can benefit you or someone you work for or even a relative. Oh, my uncle, yeah, he's part of that business. Conflict, voting conflict, don't do it. Okay, you might be in trouble if you violate the Sunshine Law. The only time you can talk to each other about Port Authority business, about water, about ships, is when you're at a notice meeting like this. At your conference, two of you at a conference, you can't talk about, you don't even want to be seen with another person if you go to a conference or you're out of town. You know, so be careful if there's a pack of you going somewhere, and Eric, just let me know when that happens and we'll do like a refresh on this because that's a danger area for you. All meetings are open and accessible, no other talking, emailing, phone calls, texting, no communication. When you come here, you are completely clueless as to what the other people are thinking about issues. You don't know what they're thinking. If you kind of have a wink or a thumbs up or you know what they're thinking, bad. You know, so you come to these meetings not having you've got a clean slate in your mind. All meetings fall under the law, subcommittees, hiring committees, leadership for your board chair, luncheons. You know, like if you have a luncheon and you're all sitting and talking, but you've noticed a meeting and you have a lunch afterwards, some of the other authorities do this on food. You can't sit at the table and carry over the discussion, which seems a little unnatural, you know. So every time, unless you're here and the whole public is watching you, you cannot talk to another member. You can't use a liaison. You can't talk to Eric and say, do you know what John is thinking about this? Do you know what Wendy's thinking about this? Do you think it's going to pass? How does this look with the other board members? That's using a staff member to circumvent the Sunshine Law. So you can't do that. No phone meetings, you know, and see, that's why sometimes our ethics laws are counterintuitive. Who doesn't like a phone meeting if it's pouring down raining or something? You know, you call in or you Skype in. Can't do it. It violates the Sunshine Law. You know, so bus tours, going over agendas, anything where you are briefed on something prior to the meeting is a violation of the Sunshine Law. You might be in trouble if you destroy public records. Everything that you create and write is a public record. When you leave this board, just turn it over to staff and say, here are my public records. You know, you don't want to have them in a garage where you lose them or something like that, and then you get a public records request. Everything you write connected to the port is a public record and has to be protected. Let's see. And text messages. Don't text on port business, and like you certainly don't want to be texting during a meeting, you know, between each other. And you might be in trouble if you don't ask questions, because we're always here. I know that that was speedy and we hit a lot of issues, but you have good resources all of the time, and I want Kirby Oberdorfer to stand up. Wave, Kirby. Kirby is the Deputy Director of the Ethics Office. She's a former law professor, and she is working with me all the time to answer your questions. Andrea Myers is new to our office. Wave, Andrea. She's working with us on training. And, of course, your best resource is Linda Williams. Linda, yeah, everybody knows you. Linda has been through a lot on ethics issues and corruption issues and worked with the FBI, so she certainly knows very well what we're talking about here. So you've got a lot of resources, and in any one of these areas that hits a note with you, give us a call and we can work with you. Okay, so that is speed ethics, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you had a long meeting, but if you have something that is nagging you right now.
Any questions? Okay.
Good.
Well, I can guarantee we all take this very seriously, and I thank you for doing a refresher so that we all keep this, in front of us.
Good.
So thank you,
okay,
Carla.
Thanks. Call us anytime.
Thank you.
With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.